Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to start with some quick opening statements, and the beauty of being moderator is I can set the rules and there's no filibustering. Senator Lucio, if you'd like to start.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased to have an opportunity to join with all of you here today. I would like to, first of all, commend the business community in this great city, all-American city, McAllen, and the surrounding cities, Mission, FAR especially, that's extremely proactive, and of course Edinburgh. It's been my honor to represent these areas over the last 21 years, and it's 31 years actually, excuse me, and I take it at heart when someone writes me or calls me, especially on issues that would have in your feeling, a positive impact for the business community. So the chamber is a vital part of any community. The Valley-wide chamber, certainly here with Sergio, all of you coming together is important for our area, our region of the state. I want to take just a few seconds to call Steve Alenius back up. You know, he's going to be serving his 20th year. And I want to present him a token of our appreciation from the Texas Senate, a gavel to him. And this gavel represents leadership, and Steve has certainly shown that with many administrations and boards. He has shown that he's truly worthy. Truly worthy of being called a leader because he leads through example. So if you go to Brownsville, they don't accept plastic bags, so you can use that one. You can shop with that one. But I just very briefly want to say, when I was a state representative in Brownsville back in 1986 when I got elected, you know, I had a folder on my desk with each community in the valley. Even though I represented Brownsville, it was always good to hear from people in other areas of the valley that I love dearly. And one of the first big issues was tort reform. I think some of you might remember workers' comp reform, tort reform, product liability reform, medical malpractice reform, all the reforms. I carried the frivolous lawsuit reform. So those are the issues that the chambers, especially in this great community of McAllen, and all the great mayors that this community has had over the years, it's been an honor. I represent this area. I take pride in that. I'm two months older than my good friend Juan Hinojosa, so I'll pull rank on him right now. I wanted to welcome all of you to my district, those of you that are outside of the district. Seriously, though, we have a great delegation. I will be talking to some of the issues, but Carlos, I wanted to just very briefly let you know that there are a lot of dynamics that took place this session. And in my 26 years in the Texas Senate, 27 with this one, 4 years in the House, I really have not experienced unfortunately, a more divisive legislative session because of the issues that we have experienced.
Senator, I'd love to get into those divisions, but if we could get to some opening for the others.
I'm going to get through.
Right okay.
Here. And I just want to add that in closing that, and I was about to get through.
God bless you.
So I'll pull rank on you too, if I may.
Well, I want to gavel as well.
You can write about me if you want. But seriously, there's some major issues that are coming up this special session, and we certainly want to make sure that we reflect the wishes of our constituents. So it's an honor to be here with my colleagues. Carlos, thank you very much for affording me an opportunity to be part of the panel.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hinojosa, please.
Thank you. And I'll be brief. I just want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this event. I think it's very important for our citizens to stay involved and be informed of what's going on in not only the Texas legislature, but in Congress. Because the decisions that are made in the Texas legislature impact you directly, not only your business, but your family and our community. So it's important that we stay informed and continue to hold the public officials accountable. And the reason my good friend Eddie supports this part of the McAllen is because the country club is here. He likes to play golf. But thank you for being here.
Representative Guerra.
Well, folks, just on? Yeah. Thanks so much for having us here. These are great opportunities for you all to visit with us on a one-on-one basis when we're not up here and ask us about specific legislation. But I will tell you that in the House of Representatives, especially this last session, as divisive as things were, I had a lot of members from other parts of the state come up to me and say, wow, you know, the last time I was down there, what a dynamic community you have. So folks understand that people throughout the state and other representatives throughout the state are taking note of this area, the Rio Grande Valley, McAllen. We are a region now, as Mayor Darling says, and they see all of us fighting to make sure that we get our fair share as best we can. As divisive this last session was, we were able to bring some of the bacon home. So thank you for having us up here.
Mayor Darling.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. You called me this morning to be up here, so I want to do a list of the legislative victories for city this year, and so I brought them with me. But anyways,
Don't look at me.
And the reason I say that, in fairness, is we're home rule cities. Most of us, the large cities, are home rule cities. And under the Constitution, we don't have to look to the state for authority. The only thing the state can do is prohibit us from doing that. So when you talk about legislative victories, when you go to the legislature each year, it's a list of things that we can't do. It's never a list that we can do because we can do things under the Constitution. So it's, in fairness to the legislature, they try to adjust things. I think the biggest problem I have is a city acts bad, like Houston for about 10 years ago, annexed the Woodlands, 50,000 people, and didn't provide anything for the city. And so they took it out on the whole state, 1,100 cities. So I always remember when I was a kid, my brother and sister were always worried about my parents doing the same thing when I got in trouble. But at any rate, you know, that's a problem for us, is when a legislature has a problem with a city, a particular city, Austin seems to be the target this year, we all pay for it. And so, you know, hopefully people understand the home rule concept and do that. Last thing I'd like to say is you guys do a great job. It was a tough session. I think you represented us greatly. You brought home some bacon, and so it wasn't a bad session from us from that standpoint. We got some great things out of the legislature, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate what you do for us in Austin.
Thank you, Mayor Darling. So the term divisive has been used several times this morning. I want to introduce another term, being a wordsmith, and that's contentious. And it seems that this session was particularly contentious. And I'm hoping, Senator Hinojosa, if you could give us some sense of what is at the core of this contentiousness.
Well, you know, I've been obviously involved in many sessions with different leadership up in Austin. And this session was really a very difficult session. And it was somewhat surreal in that all the decisions were being made by a small group of a team from the leadership down. And it was also very much what I consider a negative type of, despite of all, we got quite a few positive things done. It had a very negative connotation throughout the session. And they seemed to be very anti-people. I was very anti-Hispanic, anti-transgender people. It was also very much anti-religion. And if you look at what's happening when they talk about freedom of religion, what they're talking about is freedom to discriminate against religion. A quick example, and I think it's important to point out. We passed legislation that allows for an agency, an adopting agency, whether state or private, to be able to refuse to place a child with a family because of the religion. It could be Muslim, it could be Jewish, it could be Catholic. It's amazing how religion has been turned upside down. Just one example. I think the other example is that there seems to be a very strong push to take control and centralize every part of government in Austin and take away the authority of the local public officials to make decisions at what is best for that particular community. So it just, in that sense, it was very negative. It was very frustrated in a sense on the Senate side. I think on the House side, a little bit different dynamics, but we have that to deal with the whole session. There are other matters, but I'll let some other colleagues speak because I could go on because there were other issues that were very much important to us, like property taxes. And I will deal with that in a minute because it's very important that people understand what's really at stake here when we talk about property taxes.
Senator Lucio, you mentioned tort reform in your opening remarks. I'm reminded that one of the legislative sessions in which tort reform took a great step forward was when Bob Bullock was lieutenant governor and George W. Bush was governor. And they were able to reach across the aisle and accomplish something significant. Did you see any evidence of that this session?
Well, not a lot of it. I certainly have a good relationship with the lieutenant governor. I think that's well known by everyone. I think we need to reach across, across the aisle. I don't only reach, I walk in their offices, I sit down, we try to figure things out. I think what I've seen, unfortunately, over the years is too much partisan. From those that get elected, they sign on to an agenda prior to even getting an orientation about how to be a legislator in either chamber. And that's caused problems, obviously. And the problem I see also with our state is, we automatically endorse a national agenda, which many times I don't agree with. I'm a pro-life legislator. I think that's well known. And I believe in protecting the sanctity of life and many other things that go with that. But I'm a pro-lifetime legislator from conception to natural death at the same time. And that's important because there's big differences there that sets us apart when it comes to addressing issues dealing with the pro-life, category. So what's happened, in my opinion, is we've seen what's been happening in Washington and kind of trickled down, and now is hitting the doors at the state capitol. And I personally am not. I don't like it. I think the new Republicans that have shown up as of late don't remember what happened back in 1990 when I first went into the Senate. I reached across and I embraced 8 Republicans. That's all that were there. There was 23 Democrats, 8 Republicans. And I supported them in their issues. I helped them. And, I found it real easy to work with them. And they remember, but they're gone. And the new ones don't understand where we've been in the past, trying to work with one another, trying to make sure that everyone in this great state, no matter where you live, where you were born, but you're here, and you consider yourself a great Texan, then we should reach out and do everything we can to work together for their benefit, for your benefit. And that's not happening enough. 85% of all the bills that were introduced did not go through the process. 85%. And I know why. A lot of them were held back for obvious reasons, political reasons, and I'm not comfortable with that. I look at the issue not as a Democrat, and I want them to look at the issue not as a Republican or a Tea Party member or a moderator or whatever you want to label yourself at. I want to look at it in terms of what that issue represents and how it's going to impact our state.
Representative Guerra, one of the interesting divisions that emerged this legislative session was the division between the House and the Senate. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that and what was at the heart of that action?
Well, first of all, and yesterday I gave a presentation, and I think we all owe great gratitude to Speaker Strauss, Joe Strauss, because he held the bar. He made sure that Katie hold the bar, okay, in essence. Because there was some legislation coming over from the Senate that we didn't have a lot of appetite for in the House. Remember that there are 150 House of Representatives and there's 31 senators, and my dear colleagues here were greatly outnumbered in the Senate, to the point where you know, they've eliminated the two-third rule. In the House, we've been able to preserve that. And that's very, very important. But before anything can go over there, two-thirds of us have to vote for it. And remember that rural Republicans and Democrats see eye to eye on more things than not. Public schools, education, health care. And so we work hand in hand together. I can't speak for what was going on in the Senate, but I will tell you very quickly, there was one day, one evening in the House when Lyle Larson, a representative from Central Texas, got up and gave a speech about he was sick and tired of his bills, all of the bills, the House bills, not moving in the Senate. What was going on over there? Then Harold Dutton got up on the front mic and gave the same speech. And next thing I know, the members, all of us, started pounding our desks and started yelling, "Open the door." And so the speaker got up and he said, "Open the door, Sergeant." So they opened the door and we started pounding, and they heard us all the way across the rotunda to the Senate. And that kind of gave you a flavor of what was going on, the dichotomy between the House of Representatives and the Senate. You've read about it. I was there. I witnessed it. And so, but I have a great working relationship with many of the senators, especially these two. Unfortunately, they were greatly outnumbered over there, but they did the best they could for us. I will have to say that. Senator Hinojosa and Senator Lucio, I don't know what we'd do without you, because you brought some sanity to the other side of the rotunda, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, and thank you for that. I think give them a big hand for holding that.
Mayor Darling, how did this internal strife manifest itself in terms of its effect on municipalities statewide?
All I know, I saw some of the city commissioners writing this pounding on the desk thing down there, writing that down. It was difficult because there were a lot of bills, there were over 1,600 bills were probably, we were concerned about. And you didn't know when they were going to come up and how they were going to come up, because it was kind of disarray. I mean, Sanctuary City bill was something that we thought going in was going to be one form, and it came out another form pretty quickly. And so it was very difficult to follow what was going to happen, I think, because of that. And so that just, you know, sometimes you didn't have time to rally anybody, to get people up to testify and those kind of things. So it was pretty difficult to follow.
A lot of the legislative body takes its cues from the leadership, and even this year there seemed to be some real contentious positions taken on by the big three in the state, the Speaker of the House, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Governor. How did that affect your ability, Senator Hinojosa, as a lawmaker, to move forward on legislation?
Well, first of all, I mean, for us here in the Valley, number one priority was the funding for the medical school. And there was quite a bit of pushback. We started with $5.5 million, ended up with about $56.6 million. But in the whole process, there was a lot of pushback because there was a perception that the Valley didn't support the medical school in terms of the healthcare district, in terms of the cities reneging on their commitment, and also that every single medical school in the Valley has a healthcare district to help support and let it grow. And they were turning our backs on a multi-billion-dollar medical complex. And that's, we had to fight that perception. The second issue that we did, we were very successful, was $150 million working with TxDOT to change the FAR interchange. That was one of the priorities for the leadership in terms of economic infrastructure improvements for McAllen, FAR, Edinburgh, and Mission, and the surrounding communities. Third, for May, was the epidemic of opioids. I carried legislation to require and install what is called the prescription monitoring program that requires for every doctor, every pharmacist, anybody that prescribes a controlled substance, that they query the computer to see whether that person is abusing the drug. Having said that, what is really happening for us, especially in the Senate, that there's a battle going on within the Republican Party. And you have your traditional conservative Republicans. They're not anti-Hispanic, they're not anti-education, very pro-business, quite frankly, getting outmaneuvered by what are called ultra-right. People that are coming in and being elected and they no longer want to see government be successful. They don't want to see government work. They don't want to come in to solve problems. And they don't focus on what I call the bread and butter issues, which are the education, healthcare, jobs, our economy, public safety. They go off on pushing the ideology, which is very difficult because within the Republican Party, a lot of them coming from rural areas, they would fight back and push back. And it was a battle within the Republican Party in the Senate because a lot of the rural Republicans were against school vouchers. It would be very damaging for the public schools. They were against making cutbacks on Medicaid and 1115 waiver funding because it would close the rural hospitals. They were against in taking away the authority from the local public officials to raise money while at the same time we're trying to cap that at the state level and pushing down a lot of unfunded mandates to local communities. So those are the battles going on in terms of the Senate. Obviously, I won't speak for the House, but quite frankly, the House had a much more solid foundation focusing on what I call your bread and butter issues of learning how to govern. And I will tell Senator Eddie, Lucio and I work together very well, and he's correct. I mean, we're not partisan Democrats. We work with Republicans, we work with Democrats, we work with Tea Party folks, as long as we focus on public policy and trying to solve problems to make things better for families and communities. And the partisanship that's showing up is very damaging because quite frankly, I tell people, you go vote. And I don't care if you vote for a Democrat or a Republican, just vote somebody that'll pay attention and focus on the needs that a community has. Thank you.
Senator Lucio, if we could follow up on that. It's a disconcerting symptom of what Senator Hinojosa is describing. And just this week, Speaker Strauss, Republican from San Antonio, was denounced by the Bexar County Republican Party for his actions last session. What kind of message does this send to lawmakers, and how does this affect the political process?
Well, you know, to be able to understand the House and the dynamics in the House, you have to have served in it, and I was fortunate to be a House member from 1987 through 1990, 4 years. We had a different speaker. The politics were different. It was shifted. It was the other way around. It was Democrats fighting with Democrats at the time. And the same thing in the Senate. There was 23 Democrats and 8 Republicans. And now I see the complete opposite. Republicans against Republicans. Rural Republicans against suburban Republicans or urban Republicans. And Tea Party Republicans and more moderate Republicans trying to come together, but it's impossible because the approach to their issues are different. I personally respect Speaker Strauss quite a bit. I've visited with him a few times. We've had dinner. One of the things that happened in the Senate, I was disgusted and very upset at a rule, unwritten rule, not to allow a House member to come into the Senate lounge to talk to us about legislation. I says, what in the world are you doing? I told a young Republican senator who was given the task of being a leader in a certain committee, I said, you're nuts. I told him that, and don't put my name down on such a rule, even if it's written or unwritten. What if my son comes over to see me? Oh, that's different. He says, that's family. He said, no, he's my colleague as well. And he works on a lot of water issues. He works on education issues. He works on business issues. He wants to come talk to me. When I go to the House, I can walk all over that floor. I can go into that lounge, their lounge, and they'll offer me a tortilla. And unfortunately, I don't turn it down. But, you know, it's different. And that's something that has happened over the years. And I personally, I'm not comfortable with that. If someone is, I tell my staff, if you see anyone trying to visit, I'm in the lounge for some reason, call me out right away. Or just escort them to my desk. I'll be there in 2 seconds. I'll drop what I'm doing. That's the kind of approach I think we need to have. I've forced a lot of meetings with the Republican leadership this session. I felt I had to sit down with my staff, and I have two staff members here that are, one of them extremely experienced on financial matters because she was my finance committee assistant for many, many years. I gave that up to be a chairman. But the point I want to make is we had to decide in our staff meeting what was going to be more important, legislation that I was carrying or the budget, which is constitutionally the number one duty we have to be there. So I started trying to figure out, Quinta Mataslan, they need my help. And they got what they wanted. I got criticized for it by the Texas Tribune just to doing my job, trying to get enough Republican members in the Finance Committee to help me put an amendment in there to help McAllen out in that regard. Same thing with the medical school funding. Chuy did a wonderful job in the position he's in, but I met many times with the Lieutenant Governor and his staff, many times with his staff only, week after week after week, until we got closer and closer and closer to the point we needed to be able to function as a first-class medical school. Those are the things that I thought were high priority for me. I still managed to pass good legislation to help children with special needs, etc. Won't go into that, but it's a lot different today than it was back in the 80s, back in the 90s. When Bob Bullock was there, you're right, there was a spirit of bipartisanship between him, George W. Bush. I supported George W. Bush because Ann Richards endorsed my opponent every time I ran. So, I didn't think I owed her anything. And we won the Valley. George W. won. He was the first Republican to win big in the Rio Grande Valley. But we had a friend here and in Washington when we needed him at any point. So what we have to do today is come together as a community, come together as one state and one legislature, not the House, not the Senate, and have your own agendas and not be able to come together because of those agendas that pits us apart. So I'm a little frustrated.
Senator, just to remind you, you were praised by the Monitor for your efforts with Quinta Mazatlán, and if it's in the Monitor, it's true. Representative Guerra, a couple of weeks ago, Speaker Strauss, in speaking to a reporter for the New Yorker magazine, said that one of the problems with the legislature now is that business is losing its influence as it relates to policymaking. He suggested that CEOs who used to visit lawmakers to influence policy are now ferrying it out to lobbyists to do the job. And as a result, that influence is dissipating. Did you see any evidence of that this session?
Well, I think the speaker was right on that. I think all of us up here are very pro small business. We really are. Just look at our voting records. And even big business, as long as it's going to help our communities. But I think Speaker Strauss is correct. The flavor, since I've been in there, has changed quite a bit in that dynamic. We were probably visited by more lobbyists this time than in past sessions. I'm not casting aspersions on lobbyists because many of them do a fine job. They help us focus on issues, and we decide whether or not their issue is good policy for Texas. But Speaker Strauss made a good point with that, and I witnessed that. I personally witnessed that. And another reason that what people need to understand, again, there's 31 senators. They got rid of the two-thirds rule. We still have that in the House. Thank God we do. And again, most Republicans in the House of Representatives see eye to eye on most issues with the Democrats. Unfortunately, they get put in a corner, and they're worried about getting reelected. So sometimes they came up to me and apologized for some of their votes. They actually came and apologized, and that meant a lot to me. But at the end of the day, an apology wasn't enough. So
Senator Lucio, you wanted to elaborate?
I just want to add a little bit because this is the second time Representative Guerra mentions a two-thirds rule. And most people know that I voted to change that to a three-fifths. And there was a reason for it. A major, 3 or 4 major reasons why I voted the way I did. Number one, I struggled and struggled for 3 sessions to pass a bill called Life Without Parole. I'm the author of Life Without Parole in Texas. I was stuck at 1920. I needed 21. Stuck for 3 sessions, 6 years. And some people were actually getting the death were getting the death penalty who didn't actually deserve it. But jurors didn't have that choice of life without parole. The next one was autistic children. Again, it took me 3 sessions to convince, and I was stuck again at 1920, until there was a new election 6 years later, and some new Republican senators came in, and I was able to convince them that it was okay. It was not going to bankrupt any insurance companies to have to provide early intervention treatments to children that were diagnosed with autism at the age of 2 and 3, and they were being dropped out of the rolls, their coverage. So families were suffering because of that. Finally, we got that done. And then there was another big issue in terms of representation in this state on the TxDOT Commission. And all of you know that they say that they have a multi-billion-dollar budget. And we had how many commissioners? 3. No one from South Texas. So again, it took me 3 sessions to expand that to 5 commissioners with the hope that Governor Perry, our friend, would appoint someone from this area of the state on that major commission, and it never happened. But I expanded that. And the way I worded it, he had to appoint someone from here. The closest we got was San Antonio, which, is too far away as far as I'm concerned. We didn't have an interstate highway. When we got there, we finally got one 20-something years later. There's a lot of reasons why I voted to change the two-thirds rule, because it makes it easier to pass major pieces of legislation. And there's 1 or 2 others. Now, think about this. In 1990, you think the Republicans were going to want for us to change the two-thirds rule to, because we were 23 Democrats. We had more than 21. But we could have changed it then and brought it down. But, nobody thought about it. I want to see 15, 16 at the end of the day someday so that we can come together bipartisanly and get things done in Austin, Texas. And when you have it lopsided either way, there's going to be, unfortunately, some disagreements, and you're not going to get the
Carlos,
job done.
very quickly, let me just say in the House.
Let Senator Hinojosa go first.
I don't want to get into a debate with my good friend, but I voted to keep the two-thirds rule because a lot of bad legislation comes out and got passed. And quite frankly, the two-thirds rule forces senators to work out the differences and maybe amend and modify some of the sharper edges of legislation. So that's very important.
Senator, can you quickly explain the two-thirds rule?
Two-thirds rule, on the Senate, we don't have a calendars committee that reviews legislation to allow it to come to debate before the full Senate, like they do in the House. So in order to be able to bring up a bill for debate in the Texas Senate, out of order, you needed 21 votes. And there are 31 senators, so there's a two-thirds rule. If you couldn't get 21 senators to agree, then that bill would not be debated on the Senate floor.
Representative Guerra, you wanted to say something?
Well, the only comment, and I can't speak for the Senate, okay? But what I can say is in the House of Representatives, it forces the members to work together for good policy for Texas as a whole. Otherwise, in the House, some of the Republican members that are being pressured would fall under that pressure for re-election purposes. So I think it's a wonderful tool for us in the House of Representatives, and it saved us from a lot of further bad legislation that, quite frankly, could have passed. So that's my only comment. Again, I can't speak for the Senate. I'm just telling you about in the House.
To move along, Mayor Darling, what is your assessment of how the Valley in general and McAllen in particular fared this legislative session?
Well, yeah, I thought we did pretty well on some of the funding, and I, appreciate that. Like I said before, it's really what we do as home rule cities is try to block anything that we're not happy with it because it restricts us. But I think there's some things that were personal to our area, especially Senate Bill 4, I think, affected us more than any place in the state of Texas. I think there's things that affected us from a standpoint of just the rhetoric coming out of there, affected our sales tax, it affected people from Mexico on how they felt about us, and that was coming from Washington and Austin. And so I think more indirectly than directly on the legislation, it had a huge impact on us, and we're still feeling it today. I mean, we had meetings on something similar today about what to do about that and some of the economic damage it's caused our area. So I think from that standpoint, it was very bad and very hurtful to us.
Senate Bill 4 seems to be emerging as the legacy of the 85th legislative session, which is not a very positive legacy. You're about to enter into a special session next Tuesday. Is the legacy of that session going to be the bathroom bill, Senator Hinojosa?
If you look at the number of bills that were identified by Governor Abbott to be considered for the special session, they're all focusing on the Republican primary base of voters. It's election year on the cycle, and I call them SACIA. We all know that. None of those bills really deal with a lot of the bread and butter issues that we face in everyday life, in terms of better public school system, in terms of providing and improving health, in terms of improving our economy, creating more jobs. They all deal with very, what I call politicized issues, and that's a challenge to us. And if I may, I think I need to also focus on property taxes, because property taxes has become one of the main issues that really took a lot of time during regular session. They're also on the special session. Let me just say that the property taxes for public school system, to support public schools, are the ones that are the highest. That's where the bulk of property taxes go. But if you look at what's happening at the state level, we have continued to decrease state funding for a public school system. That decrease has to be made up by local public schools by raising property taxes. And then on top of that, there's a push and a pull by the state in that, for example, in Senate Bill 1, there's a provision there that requires for local property taxpayers, taxing districts for public schools, to raise them by about 13%. 13%. Because to make up the decrease in funding at the state level. So it is really unfair in many respects to come and tell the local public officials, well, guess what? We want a $1,000 pay raise for teachers, but we're not going to pay for it at the state level. We're going to let you pay for it by increasing your property taxes. So that's an issue that we will take up again this coming session, special session. And for me, I trust the local public officials who are elected. If they're not doing a good job, I trust the voters to vote them out.
Senator Lucio, was next week's session worth it?
I'd like to elaborate on a little bit on that
Sure.
one as well. The governor has the total authority to call a special session. So he's calling a special session. We're going in Tuesday of next week. He also has the full authority of naming what bills will be eligible in that special session. And he went a bit further. He decided what representatives or what senators would be carrying those bills, as Senator Hinojosa mentioned. So all of that, it's already set. I think the most powerful person, in state government, and I don't speak against the speaker, because the speaker, quite frankly, is stepping up to the plate and being most effective in the whole process. But the lieutenant governor decides what bills come to the floor. He could counter the governor and say, I'm not going to recognize the senator on such and such bill, even though it passed through committee. or I'm going to work. I'm going to ask my appointees in these committees not to support that bill. In the House is different. You have a different system, and some bills are able to get to the floor even if the speaker doesn't want them to, because they operate different. And both of these gentlemen, all three of them actually, the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker have different ways or different approaches, and how they address public policy. The bathroom bill, I voted for it. I was the only Democrat in the Senate to vote for it. I voted for it because, when I got elected in 1990, all we had back then, the latest technological advance, was a fax machine. Now I get text every minute, on issues. And believe it or not, many of my constituents said, look, Eddie, I feel like you do. I think that everyone morally should have the right to a bathroom. That's a human right, and that's the way I feel. And we agree. But I don't want a biological male to be in my bathroom. And that's a text that I received from women. So it's a hard issue. I just want to add this, if I may. I went to the movies one time toward the end, and I think there was a reason for me to go to that movie. It was Arthur. And at the end of the movie, I told my assistant, hey, I need to go to the bathroom. I'll be back. So I walked down the hall, and it said restrooms. I walked in there. I thought maybe there was another sign, right? Men's, women's. No, there weren't any signs. On the right-hand side were like 20 lavatories where men, women, and children were washing their hands. On the other side were just, individual stalls, very private, where people just went into the bathroom. Not men, not women. So I think that's the future of this state, this country. I think that might be a way to eliminate all the, discrimination, as some people allege this is. My vote was not to discriminate. My vote was only to try to find solutions to those that felt they needed their privacy as well, and then accommodate those that, who identify themselves different from what their biological birth is. So, it's a big issue. It's a hard issue. The business community is crying out that this is going to hurt business and that we might see a fall in the economy. Let's wait and see, and we'll go from there.
Go ahead, Senator.
Yeah, I just got to respond to that because I don't think government has any business getting involved in your bathroom. I really don't. The problem has come about because of transgender children in the public school system who are confused at a very young age. And to me, which bathroom they use ought to be left up to the parents, to teachers, to local public school system. They've been able to work through this issue without us at the government level coming in and telling you which bathroom to use. And then how ridiculous, let me just tell you how ridiculous it is. Who's going to enforce the law? Who? Is somebody going to stand there at the bathroom door, checking you out, drop your pants? I mean, it's really amazing how absurd some of these issues are getting. They're just, I feel very strong about that some issues ought to be left up to the families and local community and not government.
We have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Is there anybody who wishes to ask a question of this panel? Oh, there's one in the back, I think.
Our police and fire and our protection with that.
What are you, a mayor or what?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Senator Lucio.
In terms of property tax reform or relief, you're going to see it. I think the votes are there to make that happen. Some of us do not support it, not because we don't want people to get a tax break. Absolutely not. The mayors in this room, the school board in this valley, county judges, county officials in this valley deserve an opportunity to have local control. And if you put a cap on any of these taxes that can be looked at and adjusted at the local level, then you're going to see services go way down. And if we were stepping up to the plate, for example, on public school finance, then I'd be okay if we were going to come in and bring in money for infrastructure, facilities, money to make sure that our children, get a quality education. But we're not doing that. We're cutting back ourselves. So you cut there, you cut here. What are we going to have? Obviously, the business community, we turn to every step of the way. But when we're not able to have private-public partnerships happen, then I feel you're going to hurt Texas by not allowing local control to continue as they have in the past.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, let me just say this. We as a state have so many pots of money, so many different ways of raising funds as compared to local government. Your local government only has property taxes and some of the sales tax. And that's it. So as a state, historically, we have continued to decrease funding for public education, but also we continue to push a lot of unfunded mandates to local communities. But at the same time, we want to tie your hands by not allowing you having the flexibility and discretion to raise taxes if you so wish, and be accountable to voters and taxpayers. It is a huge problem for us because if we are not going to fund public services adequately, and we cut off your ability to be able to raise revenue, which the majority of the revenue goes to public schools, to our police, firemen, for public security, we've got problems. We have a lot of issues, to me, that are very unfair to local property taxpayers who are led to believe that we brag by not raising your property taxes, but at the same time push that responsibility to local public officials, and then we want to tie their hands.
Carlos, I think it's also good to go back and look at how we voted on tax reform in the past. I voted for a $10 billion tax reform under Governor George W. Bush, another $10 billion tax reform under Governor Perry, another $4 billion after that, so about $24 billion of reforms. When they've come to my desk, I've supported and I've voted for that. Strayhorn, Carol Strayhorn, a former comptroller, told me, because I called her, she was a dear friend. I says, Carol, what do you think about the new business tax? He says, it's not going to work. So I was the only Democrat that voted against that bill. And many Republicans voted for it as well at the time. I voted against it, and it didn't work, and now we're trying to eliminate it. So we've been able to eliminate it little by little. So all these things have to be looked at. When I say I don't support, I just don't want to see city government, county government, school government be stymied in any way or have their hands tied without them having local control.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Is there anyone out there? Yes, ma'am.
I own a medical billing and collection company, and it's very disturbing for me coming from the East Coast to the Valley, which is very, in some ways, a drag. You guys are a dinosaur. And I see people, doctors, you all are letting these insurance companies come in and not holding them accountable to make sure these doctors are getting paid fairly and correctly. In addition to that, you guys, I'm speaking from a point of, I'm new. I only been here, a year and a half, so I don't know any of you. So I'm saying I'm holding you accountable to make sure that these people, most people in this room don't know how their insurance works. I have people coming in my office where I'm helping them pick out the best insurance for their families because someone in their company didn't understand or explain to them how their benefits work from an EPO, a PPO, CMDP. They don't know all that.
What's your question, ma'am?
And so my question is, what are you guys doing to prevent or hold those insurance companies accountable when they bring their line of business into the Valley or into Texas, period? Actually, I'm just worried about the Valley.
Anyone? Senator Hinojosa.
I guess I didn't quite understand the question, but for me, what I see happening is that if you look in here in our state, a lot of working families, it doesn't make a difference whether you are white, black, brown, or whatever. But we all have and want the same things. We want good schools, we want good jobs, we want security and everything else. But we are pitted against each other by politics. And to me, when you talk about some of the big companies coming in here, we have to all stand together and try to make sure they're fair to the employees and provide the proper benefits. But it's always a battle for the simple reason that people are very occupied with making a living, paying their bills, and then we don't have time to get involved in trying to push back on a lot of this abuses that take place by large companies.
Okay. All right, let's give them a round of applause. I'm going to, just real quick, I'm going to have Mark Mangum come up with the Boys and Girls Club. They have a real quick presentation they'd like to make, and Mark promised me it wouldn't be more than 2 minutes.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, McAllen Chamber. We wanted to take this opportunity to thank our legislatures up in Austin, and I'm glad I see the mayor on the table because he plays a big part. We're part of the McAllen Boys and Girls Club, and real quick, there was some funding we get through grants this year, and in the Senate version, they cut it out completely, and on the House version, they added some money. And we went down there knocking on all their doors. They received us. Your staff was incredible. Thank you very much. Long story short, we got all our funding back, and it was because of the hard work of each one of you all. So for all the work you guys do, not only for our organization, but for all the other organizations you do for McAllen and the Valley, we have some gifts here for you. And these were done by some of the kids at our club. And just want to thank you very much. Now, you'll notice there's a big one there. And I think that's because we probably knock on Senator Hinojosa's door more often than not. And so we want to thank you very much. And I just introduced Julie as our president of the club. So on behalf of all of us, the kids, and all you do for us, thank you very much for what you do.